part of my job to ensure that all prospective students understand the value proposition that a free advanced degree in STEM has for you. So I'm very excited to have a conversation about GEM. Unfortunately, I have some travel today, but I still really wanted to have a conversation with you all. So we'll have a very condensed conversation about the GEM fellowship. Why my screen? So just a little bit of more about myself again. Tim Thompson, Innovation Program Manager, New York City native, by way of the Bronx, New York. I received my master's degree in public administration from Cornell University. So similar to Dr. Colleen, who says she's from Western New York, I know what it's like to be overwhelmed by snow. Um, Very excited to have this conversation with you all today because at GYM, we firmly believe that all students that are members of GYM, excuse me, that are members of SHIP and are interested in pursuing an advanced degree, we firmly believe that you should be going to school for free. And so there's several ways to go about that, but the one that we're going to talk about is the GYM Fellowship. So GYM is an employer selected and university funded program. So this means that our students are recruited by over 130 of the top STEM universities in the nation. Our students receive a paid summer internship from one of our 75 employer organizations, and there's full graduate tuition and fees, plus that guaranteed minimum stipend included. And so, as a gym fellow, you're essentially getting paid to go to school for free. Uh, as a gym fellow, you can become a gym fellow by as a master's student or as a PhD student. So we'll start with the master's. You as a master student, you receive a minimum of $8,000 stipend for up to 2 years. So you'll receive that stipend throughout your duration as a master's student, with the full tuition and fees. That's going to be consistent throughout gym, no matter what type of fellowship you receive through gym. You'll have full tuition and fees. But the master students are required to have participate in two paid summer internships. So if you're a master student, you receive a fellowship, you're required to have two paid summer internships. The master students also uh, often secure a full-time position with their employers after their internships because of that strong relationship and the consistency through interning for those 2 years. Now, moving down to a PhD student, you receive a minimum of $16,000 a year. And the first year comes from Jim. I don't want anyone to get confused by that. As a fellow, you'll receive up to 5 years of funding as a PhD student. It's just that the first year comes from Jim, and then the remaining years, the university commits to funding you. So that's something to be mindful of during these turbulent times where funding is quite scarce. Um, Master students are only required to participate in one summer internship. So that doesn't mean that you can't continue working with your employer, you're just not required to participate in more than one. One piece that I want to highlight as we talk about these minimum stipends is that they're minimums. And so whatever the standard stipend is for the university that you attend, that the university will match that stipend if you become a fellow. So if you get accepted to a school that has a $40,000 stipend, but you see that we have a $16,000 minimum, you'll get 40. The university will pay what the standard is. So I'm going to move on. So just a little bit about how gym works. The gym application is always going to be due on the second November, or excuse me, the second Friday of November. This year, that's going to be November 13th. You have to apply to at least three gym universities by the university deadline or by January 15th. So this means if your university has a deadline to apply January 1st, then you apply January 1st. But if they have a deadline to apply January 20th, you're going to apply January 15th. So no later than January 15th. Industry interviews and the application process is going to take place between January and April. So if you apply for the fellowship and you hear back from an employer, you'll have your interview and hear back within that window of January and late April. That may vary. Just in full transparency, many of our employee organizations are federally funded, and that has kind of interfered with the time that you'll hear back from an employer. So now it used to be early April, now it's later April, maybe early May. So just wanted to brace folks to that for that, so there's no panic when you apply and it takes a little while to hear back. Now, in terms of the universities, when you apply to a gym university, you should hear back to receive confirmation on your status by May 15th. So it's important to differentiate that if you do apply for the gym fellowship, you do still have to apply for a university. However, the fellowship application mirrors the university application. So if you submitted a gym application, you're in a better position to apply to the universities. And later on in the year, I'll mention this again before I jump off the call, but later on in right before May, I'll have another conversation for the graduate series through SHIP. That'll be tips on submitting a competitive gym application. So we could start talking about how you could meaningfully put together a competitive uh, gym application. And the last bullet on the slide, Jim Fellows intern with industry sponsors in the summer. So if you receive an internship, just know that that's going to take place sometime in the summer. There's 75 employers. We're not sure exactly when the internship is going to take place, as it's going to be relative to your employer. So that's just something you want to be mindful of. So a little bit about the internship requirements. Internship is going to begin the summer immediately after your application. So if you apply for the fellowship in November of 2026, your summer internship is going to take place in November 2027. Master students are required to complete 2 summer internships, so that's a reminder, with the sponsor, but the PhD students are required to only complete one. All interns are evaluated as potential full-time employees. This means that you will be treated and paid as a full-time employee. Employers also pay internship salary and travel. So this means that if you have to relocate, that's also going to be on the employer's dime. And so typically, if I'm out at a conference and I'm talking a bit about gym, students typically say, "Well, this opportunity seems too good to be true," and that's absolutely not the case. This is just a very competitive program, and so we oftentimes have students who are absolute rock stars, but they don't necessarily get selected to have an internship, and so we have a system in place for that. And that's going to be the Gym Associate Fellows and the Gym University Fellows. But I'll start by explaining the Gym Employer Fellows. The Gym Employer Fellows are the students that do receive the summer internship. They'll also receive a stipend and full tuition and fees. But for the rock stars that weren't necessarily selected by an employer, but the universities are enthusiastic about them, they don't receive a summer internship, but they still receive a stipend and they still receive full tuition and fees because the university said, "Hey, we still want this student to be a fellow." So they're committing to you as a gym fellow and committing to giving you the 5 years of funding if you're a PhD, 2 years if you're a master's. And the last is a master's student who didn't receive an internship, but the university still wanted them to have the fellowship. That's going to be the Gym University Fellow. So you won't receive uh, the the internship or the stipend, but you still receive full tuition and fees. So no matter what flavor of the fellowship you receive, you will absolutely go to school for free. And so with that, I'll stop. I don't know if we have any time for questions, but I didn't want to dominate the conversation. I really wanted to give the students on the call an opportunity to digest a little bit of what the gym fellowship is and introduce you all to it. But I don't. if we have time, I'm glad to answer a few questions. But for all the students on the call, feel free to scan this QR code and fill out our prospect list. I promise it'll take no more than 2 seconds. Fill out the QR code. It'll confirm you in our prospect list. And so once the application cycle opens in January 1st, you'll start receiving information around the deadline of and pertinent information around the application process. So Nazir, do I have time for questions or do we need to skip?
Yeah, about like 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any questions for me? And I'll stop sharing. I'll put the link. I'll put the link to the prospect list in the chat for all who didn't have a chance to fill it out. Any questions for me?
If they don't have questions right now, I can also like forward them questions afterwards if they don't
Yeah,
have
that,
any.
that works. I'll leave my email as well as the prospect list in the chat box.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is the prospect. So the first link I just added is the prospect, and then next, oh, I see a question in the chat. So the fellowship, the question is the fellowship open to international students with no sponsorship needed? The GEM fellowship is only available to for students with citizenship and full-time and permanent residency. And that's the issue that we run into constantly on the road. What I will say is if we do offer when we do come across students that are international, we do keep track of their contact information. If there's an opportunity to forward that with organization who can support with funding. We also I still think it's meaningful to participate in, let's say, the tips for submitting a competitive application workshop because you still receive information that'll help you draft a competitive application. So we really don't like having to turn students away, so we do everything we can to support them. Um, so question in the chat, how did I know I wanted to go to grad school? And how did I plan the years leading to grad school? So that's a very interesting question because, as I mentioned, my master's is in public administration. And so I was actually working for a college in central New York. And I realized if I was going to be working at a college that I would have plateaued already at the position that I was in if I didn't pursue an advanced degree. So whether I wanted to stay in academia or pivot, I knew that either I would have a difficult time growing or I would have a difficult time moving on and being competitive in any workforce without that advanced degree. So it was really just it was something that I needed to do for any sort of professional growth. Oh, is there another question? Okay. Any other questions? All right. With that, I really thank you all for your time. For all the students, please go fill out that prospect list or prospect card just so we can secure you as a student that's enthusiastic about gym. We look for that during the application cycle. And I wish you all the best panel discussion. My colleagues on the call, it was good to connect. Appreciate you all. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Tim. I'll send
Oh,
you any
and oh, the
questions if
email
they have
address.
any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I'll drop my email in the chat. I didn't add it. Thanks for the reminder.
All right, guys. So now for the panel part of the event, I dropped a link in the chat for you guys to select your top questions um, for our panelists, Dr. Colleen Coulter and Dr. Priya Date. The Mentimeter code is here, the QR code is here, so if you guys can please go ahead and start scanning that. I can start seeing like what top questions want the students want answered. So I'll give you guys like maybe 1 more minute and then I can start asking my first question from the live poll that we have here. I'll start off by letting Priya and Colleen introduce themselves. So I'll let you guys go first.
Thanks, Nazira. So my name is Priya Date. My last name is pronounced as Date, just like you would say latte. Um, and I am a biomedical scientist by training. So both my bachelor's, master's, PhD, and postdoc. Everything has been in biomedical sciences. I'm not an engineer by trade, but I work in the engineering school at UVA, where I'm the director for graduate affairs. What that means is I help students, all graduate students, master's as well as PhD, right from onboarding them, recruiting, onboarding, and then their time here at UVA all the way to graduation. So I do all kinds of support for students. I also oversee the school's fellowships, among other things, and do career and professional development for our graduate students as well. So that's in a nutshell who I am. I know there was an interesting question earlier on, like how did I decide to go to grad school? I would like to share a little bit about that because that's a really important question as to how do you decide you want to go to grad school. For me, I was just always super curious about how things work. And eventually, through middle school and early high school, learned that the only way to figure out and work on questions that you want answers to is to get into research. And that curiosity made me pursue undergraduate research, which then got me interested in learning and getting deeper knowledge in one particular discipline, which is what I did during my master's, and then got really interested in learning more about genetics and evolutionary biology, which is what my PhD degree is in. But at that time, I was growing up in India, and there weren't any opportunities for me to do that kind of research in India. And so I moved to the US for my graduate work and have been here since then. So that's me.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having us here to talk about all things graduate school. I can say that I knew since probably middle school that I wanted to be a writer. And and then eventually when I came to understand what research was, I knew I wanted to be a researcher. So I started out with a bachelor's degree in English literature and went on for a master's in that and wrote a master's thesis. And then that's really when I caught the bug for more research and more writing. And so I then went on to study higher education administration. For my undergrad, I went to a State University of New York at Geneseo. Some of you may know that, small liberal arts honors institution. And then I went on to Seton Hall University for my master's and University of Rochester in New York for my doctorate degree. When I went on for my doctorate, I decided that I wanted to study something different than English literature. And I really wanted to understand the college campus and how universities worked and institutional history of higher education. So I went on for higher ed administration and I studied campus politics in higher education. So that was what my dissertation was on. So it was a natural fit when I was recruited by Purdue to work to launch an umbrella life science program in known as the Interdisciplinary Life Science program at Purdue. And I went there to start that with my keen interest in campus politics and how to sort out solutions and bring people together across silos, led me to Purdue. And now I'm in the College of Engineering. And writing a book. So that's exciting. You know, you can really achieve your dreams through graduate school, I think. And I think if you're curious, like what Dr. Date said, If you're curious about a certain subject and you're wondering if you can learn more about it, go to graduate school and start with a master's if you're not certain it's something you want to do for a longer period of time. And then, launch into research into a PhD. But I think there's just a lot you can do with graduate studies.
Thank you so much. I realized I had the wrong QR code up there, but now it should be the right one. Apologies about that. So we're getting more questions. We're getting more people in here, so perfect. Okay. So the question that people have been asking the most is, should students consider working before applying? How can industry benefit my application to grad school?
Do you want us to go in any order here?
No, please just.
Okay. So industry, I think there's a lot of focus now on career readiness and connecting in industry, having an internship, or just capitalizing in some way, maybe through shadowing or something like that, can be really helpful in terms of marketing yourself. But it really depends on, what you are most interested in. Is it that you want to connect an industry right away and you're sure that's what you want to do? Then there's all kinds of ways you can do that through different degrees. Like professional master's degrees are really on the rise right now. That's something that's often in professional master's, in the way that I'm talking about it, is a master's degree that includes coursework and then often includes something project based that could be with industry or some sort of internship, and it can make it so you're well connected before you even graduate and you know where you're going to get a job.
Absolutely. I agree with what Colleen said. And then would also add that any experience you bring to your application for graduate school is going to be, it's going to have you stand out more than the other students who haven't had any experience. So whether it's undergraduate research experience, whether it's internships, whether it's actual professional experience working for a company, all of those are good things and will only add on to your application. But from a faculty's perspective, someone who reads these applications, as a faculty member, I'm not, but I'm speaking as a faculty member, they read your application very differently than a person who is trained to keep an eye out for different experience reads your application. So how you write about these experiences in your statement of purpose or your interviews and talk about them is going to be very important, because as you may or may not know, for faculty members, the currency for research is publications. So a lot of them straight up go for how many publications have you had in your research, undergrad research or other things. And you might as well have done really excellent work in an industry partnership as an intern or as an employee of an industry. But if that doesn't show up as a publication, a faculty member may miss out on that. So it's really important for you to showcase your work and your experiences in your personal statements or other opportunities that you get throughout your applications process for graduate school.
Thank you so much for answering that. The next question we have is, what are common mistakes you might see in a personal statement?
Since you were just talking about kind of leading there, do you want to take this one?
Sure, thanks. Common mistakes. Um, a very common mistake is going on, which is a lot of number of pages. That's the number one pet peeve. Like, imagine faculty members who have to read, if not 20, 30, but like hundreds of applications sometimes. And they don't have a lot of time to read these applications. So you want to make sure that you can narrate your story, which is your personal statement. So it should go and read like a story. In a page a page and a half, definitely not more than 2 pages. Because what I typically advise students is the hook needs to be in the first half of the page where someone starts reading your story and wants to keep reading. It shouldn't be like, oh, I don't want to read it anymore. I'm just going to move on to the next application. So, my first pet peeve and the biggest mistake students do is try to cram as much information about themselves as they can in a personal statement, but forget that they have another tool in their toolbox, which is their resume or CV. So, a lot of the information that's on your CV and resume doesn't necessarily need to be written out in a story format in the personal statement. So, use that real estate very wisely. And I'll let Colleen speak more too.
Yeah, I think showcase yourself as someone with a skill set that can handle solving problems. So in some way, showcase how, you're a team, you're team based, you're a collaborator, and then give an example. And like Priya was saying, don't focus on 10 million things. Focus on one thing you've done and done well. And it could be like if you've had an internship, or it could be something you did that was team-based in an activity that you did. But talk about what your role was, and then how that skill set would translate to graduate school. And also provide other information about be authentic, say who you want to work with or what facilities you're interested in, something that's unique to the institution where you're applying, so that the reader is not looking at it as like another generic statement that could be just used everywhere. Find these small, of course, you're going to use some of the text for other school applications, but make something in there about that institution and about the people there that you want to work with.
If I can also add, be very mindful of how you use AI nowadays in your personal statements. Um, it's use it as a tool. So when I'm talking to even graduate students who are working on their research statements or personal statements, I say, AI is a very risky thing because trash in, trash out. It depends really on the prompt that you give and how it spits out the information for you. So it's good to use it as a tool. But what Colleen was saying earlier, the final product of your personal statement has to have your inner voice and your story to it and not read like a machine wrote it. So that's really important. And people are really paying close attention to those things nowadays.
Yeah, I completely agree. Having your personal statement being tailored specifically to like the school you're applying to is very important. I would agree with that. Okay, the next question I have is, let's see. Okay. How important is it to contact faculty advisors before applying?
It really depends on the program. When you're applying, I always recommend that you ask the program administrator, whoever the main contact is, how their program does it specifically, because some want you to contact faculty as early as when you're considering applying, it's free game always. But some communities, or the culture of a department or school, could be that they don't really interact with students until they've submitted an application. Not all are like that. I mean, a lot of times there really needs to be some sort of interaction, but oftentimes it's like at a conference or through a summer research opportunity or something like that. But yeah, ask the program administrator, because they'll let you know straight up what the program needs.
Yeah, I would say here, at least in UVA, and I'm pretty sure that's common across a lot of institutions, what Colleen was saying, it depends on the degree program that you're applying to as well, like whether it's a course-based master's versus a research-based master's versus a PhD. If you're applying for a PhD, Yes, absolutely. Reaching out to a faculty member, making that personal connection, showing that you're really interested in their research and what excites you specifically about their research goes a long way because then your application or your name will remain in their memory when they're reviewing applications. If you start building that relationship earlier on, whether you first got introduced at a conference and then do follow-ups and then closer to the application cycle, say, hey, I'm really interested in working with your group. That does work. But if you're applying to a course-based master's program, which is not really selective in that sense, where you're doing a one-on-one match with a faculty member, it really doesn't help you that much to contact individual faculty members in those cases. But when funding is involved, definitely reaching out to people who have the ability to make those decisions really helps you.
But don't spam. Don't write a general email and send it to a million institutions because that does happen, believe it or not, or it happens where someone writes to tens, departments within the same university, and then no one knows if they should respond or not, like, or who's going to respond, and it gets really complicated, and just don't do that.
Absolutely. And follow email etiquette where if someone doesn't respond, don't keep pinging them. Like maybe one follow-up, but if they're not responding, they probably don't have an opening in their lab, so let it go.
Those are very good tips. Definitely don't want to spam people, but at the same time, you still want to like be like, hey, I already have the no. Let me just see if I can get a yes. Um, being mindful of people's times as well. Okay, so the next question here is, what are signs that someone may not be ready for graduate school yet?
That's a good one. Graduate school, if signs that you're not ready, if you're having that question itself might be a sign that you're not ready. And it's a good question or good thought to have because it opens door for exploration, right? Like, so asking graduate students who are in your departments or in your programs questions about what is a life in a graduate student's day look like if it's a PhD student versus like a master's student who's course based, how different is that from an undergraduate day-to-day life? Thinking about those things, thinking about, does research excite you? If you think of your projects or research projects that you're doing in your classes right now, if they don't really excite you and it just feels like a chore, then maybe research-based degrees are not something that are there for you, and you need to explore a little bit more and get more experience in those. For course-based masters, it's a little bit relatively easier because they're course-based. So they're like a more intense version of undergraduate classes that you take because it's more deeper knowledge, more graduate level courses that you'll be taking. But when you're talking about research-based degrees, it comes down to digging deeper, problem solving, critical thinking, doing more of team work because a lot of the work that happens in engineering research does happen on a team basis. So if project management and those kinds of things don't excite you, then maybe a research-based degree is not for you. That I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a really thorough response for sure. Ask questions, absolutely. Leave options open for yourself. If it's just because you're intimidated by the thought of it, that's not a reason. I think we all go into it thinking, oh gosh, am I going to get in? Who's going to pick me? Those kinds of things. We go through those feelings when we're putting an application together, like, is this all worth it? Leave your options open for sure. Um, and and explore, ask a lot of questions and look at job postings because you may want to look and see if job postings say that a certain degree is required. And if that's something you really want to do, then there's an answer for you. Then you really need to go to graduate school.
Yeah, those are great answers because I think oftentimes what I've seen some of my people that are trying to apply to graduate like they're like scared or like oh like that's like a lot. And so it's a good question to have to just make sure that that's exactly what you want to get into. So speaking of transition, one mindset is shifts is required when transitioning from undergraduate professional life into grad school. What are some of like those like mindset shifts that are needed?
So graduate school has a lot more ambiguity to it than undergrad. I think that when you're in undergraduate study, you know pretty much from when you start what you need to do to finish. I think in graduate school, even when it's course based, you may know the layout of the courses for the most part, but there's going to be more choices. There are going to be more people you need to talk to in order to get to the next step and really make it productive. You need to possibly look at internships, look at research partnerships or industry partnerships. How do you do that? Um, but and then going on for a doctoral study and doing research there, I think there's a lot of time you need to think through problems, and you're becoming a producer of knowledge. So as you do that, there's a lot of uncertainty. I think that it's not even just about what the subject matter is and delving deeper into that, but I do think that it asks a lot of you. Graduate school asks a lot from you, and what you put into it, you get out of it, just like with AI, right? Um, from what Priya was saying, the more you put yourself into it, the more you'll get out of graduate study, but it takes a lot, it's demanding.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Colleen said. You go from a knowledge consumer to a knowledge producer when you move from an undergraduate to a graduate program. There can be basic academic policy differences that you need to be aware of. For example, good academic standing GPA for an undergraduate degree might be 2.0, but the bar gets raised when you go to graduate school. And that's really important to be mindful of if you're in a course-based master's degree program, where now the GPA requirement might be 3.0. And so you have to make sure that you meet those minimum GPA levels in order to even just finish and get your graduate degree. For research-based masters, it's really um, focused on independence as you get through the program. So the goal of a PhD typically is that at the end of your PhD, when you graduate, you are a very independent researcher, critical thinker, a leader, and someone who can lead projects and do research on their own. That's the goal of a PhD, right? So that mindset shifts. No one is going to schedule your classes after the first year. No one is going to tell you you need to be here from this time to this time. A lot of times, faculty members give a lot of flexibility to their graduate students for what hours they work, but they want to also make sure that they're productive so that they're doing their research. But it takes a lot of self-discipline in that sense, to be able to follow that from week to week or keep that sustainable, and keep your interest in curiosity in your research sustainable. So taking care of your mental health is really important in grad school because there's a lot of ups and downs, as Nazira might, be able to share more, but like, your abstract gets rejected or your experiment is not working. And just because the sun was a little bit left versus right, something you absolutely were confident that was going to work doesn't work, right? But that you shouldn't feel like, oh, that's the end of the world or anything of that sort. All grad students go through different those phases. And so making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you're using your project and time management skills. A lot of this is dependent on you. There are faculty members and advisors and committees who will guide you through the process. But that's the biggest difference is the knowledge producer to knowledge, like consumer to producer, and then dependent on someone to completely being self-reliant in especially research programs. Those are some big differences in the transition.
I'll add one more thing to that. If you're already a SHIP member and you're an undergrad and you have this awesome support system in place that is international, and that is a huge jump ahead of a lot of other people applying to graduate school. So continue to rely on this as a pipeline for you for, I've been at SHIP National Convention with faculty members from Purdue that, yes, with faculty members from Purdue that started out in SHIP as undergrads. And what an awesome thing to see that pipeline. So, and that goes for industry too, seeing people there from different corporations that were in SHIP when they were in undergrad and then went on to grad and industry. So just I mean, a shameless plug, I guess, for SHEP, but really, I mean it. Utilize it, lean on it.
Yeah, my committee and everybody who's like in the graduate national undergraduate committee for grad students, we all try to like host events like this and like other stuff just catered towards grad students. So please come to our events when you become a grad student. Okay, I'm gonna do one more question. So Tim already kind of hit on a little bit of this, but students are asking what fellowships, scholarships, externships should like applicants be aware of?
Um, That varies from school to school, and from region to region because there might be, different resources that each place has, depending on degree programs, depending on institutions, depending on states sometimes. That varies a lot. But just to be I can put some general guidelines as to like usually schools have what they call as recruitment fellowships. So these are fellowships that you might necessarily not be able to apply yourself, but the program that you're applying to looks at your applications and thinks, oh, this student is so top notch that we want to recruit them to our institution. So we're going to recommend them for an internal fellowship to to then attract them to come join our institution. So those are some really great recruitment fellowships that you can be aware of. Look at their descriptions because a lot of times institutions have those on their school websites. And then that can help you cater your application to make sure your application stands out in those areas. Once you do get into grad school, and if it's a funded program, typically PhD students are funded in three different ways. One is research fellowships, or research assistantships. You can call it all different things, but it means the same thing where you're performing research for either a sponsored fund or federal fund or something of that sort. And in return of providing that service of research, you get stipend, right? So that's what a typical research assistantship is. Same goes with teaching assistantships. So if you're providing the service of teaching undergraduates at a given institution, then you get a teaching stipend or you get a stipend in return for those services. And then the third kind, typically students who are funded are on our fellowships. So these can be internal fellowships, external fellowships, national fellowships. For example, the NSF-GRFP is a very prestigious national level fellowship where undergrads who are applying to grad school can apply, as well as you can apply in your first year of graduate school. And that fellowship is again really prestigious, ups your application or CV for later career moves as well. Um, there are several other like individual organizations might have fellowships that support. GEM is, for example, a fellowship that can support you as well throughout your graduate career. And then each school has their internal fellowships that you can get as well. So, but those are the three main buckets that students can be funded on. If you're not a funded student, then, on-campus jobs, part-time jobs, and internships, those are the kinds of things that can help you finance your degrees.
And some of those degrees, or some of those funding packages, you're considered for right when you apply. So you can apply to certain graduate programs. You'll be put in the pool for that department or that college, however the funding works at that institution. It depends on that, but you can be considered for a certain number just with your regular application. And then, of course, there are more beyond that, and that's what you want to ask questions about. But I think it's good to know that some of this you're considered for immediately upon submitting your application.
Yeah, so that's typically what we call PhDs for free, where it used to be that all PhD students are always like full funded for 5 years at least at most institutions. That was kind of an unsaid rule. In the current funding scenarios, that's kind of getting a little bit tricky, but a lot of the programs are still trying to honor that and give students good enough packages where if you're in a PhD program, specifically in the STEM field, you're most likely going to get some sort of assistantship and full tuition and fees and health insurance paid through the school. So that goes with the application, like Colleen was saying.
Thank you. So I'm gonna do some closing remarks, and then we're gonna take a photo, and then I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. Thank you so much for all your answers. And one funding you should not forget about is the scholarship. There's that one out there too. So please apply to that one. That also applies to grad students as well as undergrads. So, some upcoming events, just so you know, you are supported as a grad student through SHEP. The RGRs are taking over, the regional grad reps are taking over. We did one a couple weeks ago about careers in industry as a grad student. We're gonna do one later this month about careers in government and national labs, as well as one in careers in academia. My RGLC, we're gonna have a navigating toxic work environments on March 30th, financial literacy for grad students in April to be decided, and another networking social, which in April, which you guys are always welcome to join us. Here are some of the QR codes to join us. And yeah, some of the upcoming events. Thank you so much. Here is a QR code to send us a post-event survey, just like give us feedback on the event, so how we can improve it for next time we do it. As well as if you're a grad student or if you're like really interested about grad school, like we also have a WhatsApp community which you can join and ask questions. We're all very friendly. We're always like happy to help out anyone. If you ever like want me, for example, to like go over like look at your like personal statement or anything, I'm always like happy to just look at it. I don't mind. But let's take a quick photo with people here because I always like to do that. So if you want to show your camera, you're more than welcome to. I'm not gonna force you to. But then after this quick photo, we're gonna go ahead and go over to like the Q&A. So I'm gonna give a quick second if anyone wants to show their beautiful faces. But if not, I'll take it now. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it. So everybody smile. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna open it up the floor to everyone here. If you guys have any questions for Priya or Colleen, please.
I also want to just genuinely thank you all for being here and taking the hour to talk to us and learn more about graduate school. So I know people will start jumping off. So I just wanted to say thank you before that. And thank you, Nazira, for inviting us. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. And just looking at your face makes me smile. So
So
Yes,
thank
you're
you
so
for
cheery.
joining
That's true. I am inspired by it as well. It's a pleasure, yeah, to present with both of you and to talk to all of you on here. You've had wonderful questions, and we're here as a resource. Uh, I don't know, Priya, would you like to both put our emails in the
Yeah,
chat?
absolutely.
So we'll go ahead and do that. And thank you, everybody. I I really think this is an awesome organization, and I appreciate you taking the time to think about graduate school.
Everyone should go to grad school.
PhD free.
I've been it for
Yeah,
4 years.
Nazira, I want you at all my presentations, doing that in the background. Everybody go to grad school.
I'll join. I'll come wear my chef and
Yes.
yeah. Yesterday we had the grad students and the professionals. We had a networking event in DC. So it was like a nice networking session for like professionals and grad students to get to know each other. So we do fun stuff as grad students, guys. It's not just research, but mostly research. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking time of your day to come and speak to us about grad school, and letting our members know what it's like or what it takes to do grad school. So thank you so
Of
much.
course. Nice meeting you, Colleen.
Yes, you too. You too.
All right, bye
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night.